apart from the health issues of having a plant-based whole food kind of diet, there are a number of other issues which are raised by vegetarians to justify that decision. Is killing animals to eat them or to use them morally wrong in some way? Is there a moral issue? Do our species have the right to kill other animals, people say? And is there something flawed in that thinking? I remember Rabbi Akiva Tatz said to me once he was on a plane and the lady next door to him didn't get her meal, and he offered her his kosher meal. She was a vegetarian, and they didn't have a vegetarian meal. She hadn't ordered kosher. He had ordered kosher, and he opened it up and he said, "Look, I don't really feel hungry. If you like, you can have my meal. It's mahadrin, mena mahadrin." And she looked at him in disdain and said, "I don't eat other animals," which is interesting, that she's an animal and she doesn't eat other animals. To which he replied to her, "Well, that's funny because other animals do eat other animals. So you're obviously not just an animal if you think that," which is very interesting. But do animals have a right not to be killed in some way? Is animal slaughter violent? Does it inflict pain and distress? Is it cruel? Is it inhumane? And what about the way that we raise animals today? Is that something? And Rav Moshe has tshuvas on this. This is not just some kind of a fringe left-wing agenda. Rav Moshe has tshuvas about veal and whether you can eat meal with veal, whether you should, not whether it's kosher or not, although sometimes it can be raised in situations which are so outrageous that it's actually treif, la halacha in kashrus as well, because they force feed the animal so much. But even if it's kosher, technically, should you eat it? He said it's raised in such an unacceptable and unethical way. And then, of course, there are the environmental arguments that animal breeding takes up much more of a carbon footprint. I don't know myself how to gauge those kind of arguments because I don't know what really will solve that problem. Meaning, I'm quite convinced that there's a climate change happening. I'm not the slightest convinced that me recycling my plastic will make any difference to anything, anywhere, to anyone. But I may be wrong, of course. So there are all those questions. And then there are Jewish sources. What about mankind? Adam and Chava were created vegetarian. I'm going to read you some sources in a minute. What about Tsar Bali Chaim? Tsar Bali Chaim is a very major issue. Maybe we'll look at that next week, and we will get to the Ethiopians. Somebody asked about the Ethiopians. We'll get there. Somebody can't remember who. But we'll get there. This is not going to take up a long... This is just going to one-off just this week. And what about vegetarianism as a kashrus chumrah? Meaning, if you're not so clear as to which hechsherim have the best kashrus on meat, and all the things that can go wrong with meat, the shchita, and the porging, and the kashering, and da-da-da-da, so lentils are going to be less of an issue for you, okay? And therefore, maybe that is something that people should consider. We also need to look a little bit at the rabbinic mitzvah of Oneg Shabbos, at the Torah mitzvah of Simchas Yontif. Are you allowed to be a vegetarian? And what about korbanos? People often ask me, yes, it's all very well being a vegetarian, but when they bring back the korbanos, isn't everyone going to have to eat from the korbanot? So we'll see how that works. So let's start with a few thoughts from the Chumash. And again, I apologize you don't have it in front of you, but it's okay. Back in the day, people used to listen and learn, so we'll do that today. The very beginning of the Torah says, "Vayom Elokim hinei natati lachem et kol esev zorei zera." Says God to Adam and Chava, "I've given you the grass, the grains, zorei zera, ashal pnei kol haaretz, all over the world. You can go wherever you like. Ve'et kol ha'etz, and I've given you all the trees, asher bo pri eitz, zorei zera, which have fruit on them. Lachem yeh la'achla, that's all for you. You have a diet of vegetables, grains, and fruit." Now, it's actually interesting. The grains are all over the world, but it doesn't say the fruit's all over the world. So was the fruit just in Gan Eden? Meaning, I don't know the answer to that and what they're trying to say in terms of, I'm not talking historically, I'm talking in terms of what the Torah is teaching, this idea you can just reach up to a tree and pick off a fruit and then eat it. Is that a product of the paradise of Gan Eden? And when they get kicked out, then fruit's basically off the menu. We'll think about that a little bit. But what about the animals? What do they get? The animals get something different. And to the animals and the birds, and everything that crawls on the earth, which is alive, what have I given them? Et kol yerek, they have to eat vegetables. Esev, grass, and that's how it was. Meaning they don't get fruit and they don't even get grains. Because if you think about it, grains we turn into stuff. Animals are not going to start baking bread from grains. They're going to eat whatever grows around, but apparently not the fruit and not the grains. And then it says, not just on this, but on the whole thing. But that's the pasuk that comes straight after, man, you are a vegetarian, and the animals are just herbivores, if you like, but man can eat vegetables, grain, and fruit. But all of a sudden, after the flood, everything changes dramatically. After the flood, you have this pasuk, really very, stands out a lot, number 2, Kol remes asher hu chai. Anything that crawls on the ground that's alive, lachem yeh la'ochle. It's yours, eat it, you can eat it. I've given it to you just like the grass. Just like grass was everywhere and ubiquitous. If you see it and it walks, creeps, crawls, whatever it does, smack it on the head, it's yours. You can eat it. Why? Everything is on the menu now. Everything that walks and creeps and crawls is on the menu. Why? What did Noach do that changed so dramatically to make that happening? And Chazal actually say, they draw immediate attention to this, I won't say number 3, it'll just tease you, I'm sorry. But for me, it's number 3. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav, Adam Arishon loy huta loy basar lachila. Adam Arishon was not allowed to eat meat. And he brings the pasuk that we just read. And when Noach came, they were allowed to eat meat. But it doesn't give a reason there in the Gemara. It's a Gemara in Sanhedrin.
After the flood, maybe it was still covered up.
Oh, so we'll see.
And there wasn't any.
We're going to see. We're going to see what the reasons suggested are soon. However, the Midrash does give us a reason. The Midrash Agadah in Breshit says, "Hutra basar taiva." Now, this is a word we're going to see again and again. Basar taiva. Meat is called lust meat, okay, which is not a good start. Okay, it's always called basar taiva, as opposed to korbanot. Korbanot, you take the meat and you offer it to God. It's a very holy purpose. You might eat it, the Kohen might eat a little bit, they don't eat much, but going to Papagayo is called basar taiva. I'll be quite clear with you, I'm not a vegetarian, I'm not going to come across as all sanctimonious. I do eat meat. I was at a wedding last night and the meat was delicious. But the point is that I do think to myself, when sometimes the meat becomes like all you can eat, and we'll get to that soon, basar taiva. He gave it to Lefi Shehikriv Korban. Answer number 1. He brought a korban, meaning he showed himself that there was something that he could do with this which connected him with God. So you're going to tell me, well, one second, he wasn't the first one to bring a korban. Who was the first one to bring a korban in the text? Cain. Cain brought a korban, vegetarian, and Hevel brought a korban, meat. So we'll see why not them. What did Noach get right that they didn't get right? We'll see that. Va'ad shehakol lemisa. Second reason, because everything was now going to die. Everything is going to die. People are going to die. Animals are going to die. Everything's going to die. And in a world which is basically heading towards death, then just eat the meat and be happy. Okay? But for Adam, it was a world where everything was life. He was in Gan Eden, and it was a world which was completely oriented in a different way. It was a world heading for eternal life. Yes, it's Amar?
But Adam was already set.
So that's the end. That's the good thing about not having the source. You can ask the questions, which the very next word. And so the world was now for death. So why Adam messed it up? Meaning Adam ate from the fruit and turned the whole world from a world of life to a world of death. Why didn't he get the heter? And the Gemara says a very important thing. So that the person who messed it up doesn't end up getting the benefit of what he messed up. Meaning Adam messed up the world. He shouldn't feel that he got something out of that. So he doesn't get to eat meat. But Noach, and we'll see other reasons as well, Noach needed that. Noach deserved that. He worked for his meat because he looked after, we'll see, every single thing on the teva. You look troubled.
Is that when Hevel died because he was the first one to bring a korban?
We'll get to Hevel in a minute as well. Excellent. We'll get to the Sefer Karim on Hevel, why he died, Cain, etc. So what do we see so far? Meat wasn't on the menu, then it was on the menu, and it's something to do with Noach, something to do with the world flipping after Adam, but Adam couldn't benefit, Noach could benefit, and also because, as we said there, Noach brought this special korban, the reach nichoach. Remember, it says with Noach's korban that God smelled the reach nichoach, which he doesn't say after Hevel's korban. Okay, just God turned to Hevel's korban. Rashi picks up. Rashi's focus is that before Noach, everybody was basically very similar. Listen to this Rashi. All behemoths and chayes back to Gan Eden had the same food. God didn't allow Adam and Chava to kill an animal, to eat its meat. But all vegetables, yochlu yachad kulam. Yachad. Everybody is yachad. Everybody is eating together. It's one big, happy vegetarian family. The people are eating grass. The animals are eating grass. The behemoths are eating grass. The chayes are eating grass. We'll see soon also the Kli Yakar understands that the animals themselves were not allowed to eat other animals. However we understand the kind of what is being communicated by Sefer Bereshit. So the Rashi stresses the fact that we were all the same, but then we were not the same. After the flood, it was a very different world. Noach was Noach. He'd somehow become very different, and the animals were now, not only were the animals still eating the old menu, but the animals were being eaten. Okay? They were not just eaters, they were eatees, if that's the word. Okay? They were being eaten. The Ramban gives a different spin. The Ramban, there on the same pasuk of what is on the menu for people and animals, says as follows. Aval natan la'adam li'ishto kol esiv zarei zerav kol creates. He gives mankind, God gives mankind fruit and grain. But to the rest of the animal kingdom, he gives only grass. Lo priha, not fruit, v'lo zra'im, and not grain. Ve'ein machalam yachad kulam b'shava. And he disagrees with Rashi. He says, therefore, they're not the same. They were different. They were set up subtly different. But different is different. He would not let them eat meat until Noah came along, okay, as the rabbis say. That is the pshat. And now he says a very beautiful thing. That on a deeper level, animals are quite similar in many ways to humans. They have a nefesh, which a blade of grass doesn't have. And it's not an intellectual nefesh, but it's similar. If you get, you can develop a relationship with an animal. People have very, meaningful kind of back and forth relations with the animals, love them, the animals cry when they're gone, they have emotions, there's no question. There's only so much of a relationship you can have with a geranium, Even though my mother loves geraniums and she's very good at growing them, you can't get that emotional about a geranium. But you can about a dog or a cat. They're different. V'yesh lahem bechira. And they have some level of free choice. B'tovatam, as to what they want. Mezonehem, and what they want to eat. V'yivrachu min hatzar, they can run away from trouble. V'hamisa, and escape from death. And that's why, v'akosava, doesn't it say in Kohelet, Mi yodeya ruach bnei adam ha'olehi lamala, v'ruach behema yoredit hi lamatzal haaretz. At the end of the day, all of us, after 120 years, we all end up in the ground. Okay, we have an neshama that goes, but you don't see that. You don't feel that as much. At the end of the day, lots of living things on this planet seem very similar. But when everything went sour, that all life became corrupted, mankind became corrupted, the animals became corrupted, the whole system, the wheels came off the bus, if you like. The and everybody had to die. Now something happened. Ba'avur Noach hitzil mehem lekiyum hamin. Noach saved them. Noach saved them. He did something very special that animals can't do. The animals couldn't save themselves. The animals couldn't save each other. But Noach saved the animals. Lekiyum hamin natan lehem reshut lishchot ulach lechol. So God said to Noach, okay, now you can eat them. So, okay, what's the connection? Just because you saved them, now you can eat them. You would have thought the last thing he'd want to do was eat them after he just saved them. But now you can eat them. Because they're all alive because of you. They're only alive because of you. You have a bias on them. You have an ownership on them. You have a superior status. It's not like we were before, when, everybody dies and animals die and people die. And okay, they're not the same. We know they're not the same, but it wasn't as obvious. Now it's obvious. These animals owe their entire existence to you. Therefore, you have a different status to them. Ve'im kol zeh, nevertheless, he says, Lo natan lehem harashut b'nefesh. You can't eat the life force. V'asa lahem eiva min achai. And you can't have eiva min achai. You can't take a limb from a live animal, which you'll say, well, who would do that? And the answer is, that's how people did stuff back in the day. Back in the day, if you were a relatively poor subsistence farmer and you were lucky enough to own a cow, you didn't kill the cow and eat the meat, because you can't eat all the meat in a cow and you can't freeze it, and not everybody had access to smoking or to pickling, and so if you kill a cow, then 80% of the meat and your money goes to waste. So they'd cut off a little bit of the leg, and then a little bit more of the leg, and a little bit more of the side, and this is what they would do. And they would just keep it alive and limping, and they would eat, and then when they had to kill it, they killed it, or it died by itself. Jews are not allowed to do that. Non-Jews are not allowed to do that. For the Sheva Mitzvah, Noach is not allowed to do that. He has to respect the life of the animal, the life force, and of course the other mitzvah is the blood, which was later given to Klal Yisrael. Non-Jews are allowed to drink or eat blood, but Jews are not. So that was added on, and all of this is coming because even though the original reason we're all life forms has changed after Noach, nevertheless we still have to keep in mind that the animals have a life, and it's not the same as a plant, and you can't eat their life force. In parentheses, Tosfos says that, okay, even if Adam wasn't allowed to kill animals, maybe he was allowed to eat dead ones that died on their own. Interesting question as to whether that's definitely off the menu, but the point is pretty clear. Now, let's go on a little bit. I want to get into a deeper understanding. Why exactly then did we eat meat after the flood? So we've seen a few reasons. Number one, Noach brought a korban. Number two, Noach now has a certain level of ownership, of responsibility for the animals, that he saved them. They live through him. So listen to the Sifsei Chachamim. Number 8, Uma shehitzil Noach habasar. Noach was allowed to eat meat. Yoter mela Adam, more than Adam was. I want to say, he says, Lefisha mikaydim hayu ha'adam behema shavim kulam. He's getting this off Rashi. At the beginning, people and animals were very similar. Maaseh Hashem, Yitzram min Adama. They were all made from the ground. They were all made on the same day. Remember, the animals were made on day 6. People were made on day 6. People were brought from the ground. Okay, God puts an neshama into the people, but in physical terms, we just look like primates. And our genetic code is very similar. One doesn't seem to have any major advantage over the other. Listen to that again. It's like the woman on the plane. If you're an animal and it's an animal, why would you kill another animal? Other animals do, but why would you kill another animal? You're all animals. But after the Mabul, shechatu kulam, that everything sinned, all the world sinned, went off. Everything should have been destroyed. And they were saved with the schut of Noach. Therefore, he gets that advantage. The Malbim brings 3 reasons why Noach was able to eat meat, and the last one is most interesting to us. The first one we said already. He is responsible for saving them, for keeping them on the ark. Next, he says, and the Malbim was quite scientific, certainly of the science of the mid-19th century. He says, look, after the flood, it probably, messed up the vegetation. Everything was all, the mud everywhere. Who knows what was going on? There just weren't enough vegetables to eat. They couldn't survive on a vegetarian diet, and therefore meats just of necessity had to be brought on the menu to keep people going. That's very interesting. But then he says the most interesting thing. I was also thinking that. It doesn't work exactly scientifically. One of the problems of interpreting Torah to fit beautifully with science is once people know more science, then you just look a bit foolish when you've made the Torah fit beautifully with mid-19th century science, and you say, well, now we're doing mid-21st century science, and that's one of the, in Kiruv, when you're presenting these amazing wow arguments of how everything fits together, you just have to be aware that your science is going to be outdated much quicker than your Torah is. So don't put the Torah on the same level. But then the Malbim says an interesting thing, and I don't 100% understand what this means. He says, "V'gam she'adam lo haya adayin b'madregat medaber," that before the flood, people weren't really medaber. People weren't really speaking creatures. Now, they did speak, because we see them speaking, but they didn't have that madrega, that level of a medaber. Rak b'madregat chai. They were basically just alive. V'lohu tirlo rak hatzomech, and therefore they could only eat like an animal can eat vegetables. V'loi haya hevdel beino u'bein hachai. There was no real major difference between humans and animals. Rak shebal chaim, balei chaim nitan leyerek esev la'achla. Balei chaim could eat the grass. U'la'adam nisan esev zorei zera, and people could eat the grains and the fruit, etc. But now after the flood, somehow or other, what Noach managed to do in the flood made him a real person, which is actually very interesting. We often are quite negative about Noach. because we compare him to Abraham, like, the Rashi at the beginning of Noah, compared to Abraham, he was a nobody. But compared to everybody else, he was a somebody. He actually built the ark and he saved the world, and he rose to his potential. And just like there's nothing wrong if an animal eats that below it, which is grass, because it elevates the grass, because this piece of grass now becomes chicken. Well, no, not chicken. Chicken doesn't eat grass, but whatever. The cow, the grass which was tzomeach is now formed into balchai. The Cain ein avalim madaber. So too, if a person who's a madaber, who's on the level of a person, yochel et achai, eats an animal, v'yitzaleh, and raises the animal liyod guf shalom madaber, can raise it to the level of a speaking animal. And therefore, he says, before the flood, there was no real benefit to the animal if a person ate that animal, because it started as an animal and it ended as an animal. And why would one animal eat another animal? What did you do for the food? I know what it did for you, but what did you do for it? Just to paraphrase Kennedy, ask not what the meat can do for you, but what can you do for the meat? Says the Malbim, you can raise the madrega of the meat, but only if you're not meat yourself. If you become, and maybe it's the chesed, I don't know, I didn't have time to look at it in more detail. Maybe it's the chesed, the enormous Mesiras Nefesh that he went to do everything that gives him his true status of human being. We can go away and think about it. What exactly was it about Noach that differentiated from Adam and gives him that beautiful status that raises him up? But the Malbim talks a lot about that and says that's why Adam was able to eat meat. And by the way, the Kli Yakar also gives that idea. He says everything eats that which is on the level below it. Okay, and then raises it. So as long as you're on a higher level, he brings an interesting Gemara. He quotes the Gemara, Kol am haaretz asur le'echol basar. Says the Gemara in Pesachim, if you're an am haaretz, you're not allowed to eat meat. Why not? Because if you're basically living like a behemoth, not necessarily in every way, but you don't have, and by the way, Am Haaretz here doesn't just mean someone who hasn't learned Torah. That's how we use the word Am Haaretz, not correct. Am Haaretz in Chazal is always negative. It's someone with a bad attitude. Judaism, Shmudism, I'm not interested, stupidity. If you basically live your life without any kind of ethical value norms that Torah gives, so why would you be allowed to eat another animal? If you become someone who's a Talmid Chacham, or someone who lives a life of values, etc., lives a life of Torah. And again, I'm not talking about someone who knows more Gemara, can eat more meat. Actually, we're going to see quite the opposite. I'm saying someone who lives a life of Torah has the right to eat that because he elevates or she elevates it to that level. The Malbim also gives, just 1 second, two other things, which again is his kind of science of the time. He says, and I'll tell you something else. If you look at where man originally came from, mankind was created in the middle of Asia, where Gan Eden is, and then was dispersed all around the world. He said, in the middle of Asia, the fruit is much more nutritious. You can live off a vegetarian diet. There's all these exotic plants. And think about it, we take it for granted. I grew up in the north of England, and not 1,000 years ago. I never saw an avocado until I moved to London. I'm not joking. I never saw an avocado. We didn't have avocados. And then all of a sudden there's this nutritious fruit. It's got lots of calories, lots of. We never saw that. I'm not suggesting we lived on gruel, and it's not quite out of Dickens. But we never saw a lot of this fruit. So he says by the time they ended up living in the north of Europe and whoever knows where, he said they didn't have all of the options. And he said, and if you look at people from those regions of the Central Asia, many of them, he says, are vegetarians, says the Malbim. He's living in the 1840s, 50s. So I don't know exactly what they knew of all the sociology, but he says they have different diet. And Taka, some of them really do have a very strict vegetarian diet. And then he says, and look at your physiognomy. Look at the way your teeth are aligned, and look at the way that your stomach acid is, and look at the way that you don't have any very sharp canines. You have little ones, but you don't look like a saber-toothed tiger. You look much more like a herbivore than a carnivore. And he said, and there must be a reason for that. And the reason is that you were meant to be eating vegetables and you weren't meant to be eating meat. Okay? So we see all of these reasons all thrown together. Why originally not, and then yes. Yeah.
But Adam, when he ate the fruit of the tree of life, he got knowledge.
Yes.
All these generations built huge cities.
Yes.
So how could you say that they were Ha'aretz?
I don't know. I don't fully understand exactly what the Malbim it means, and
The intellect had to be
correct.
done.
But maybe once we got past the flood, something significant changed. Interestingly, Migdal Bavel happens way after the flood, not before the flood. So they built a city, but maybe it was like a bit of a Nebuch city as opposed to ziggurats, and who knows? I don't know. Sorry, Ian, we need to think about it further. Now, your point about, someone made a point about Hevel. You went and made a point about Hevel. So I'm not going to read this all out, but let me tell you, the Sefer HaIkarim has a beautiful thesis, Rav Yosef Albo, living in the 1400s in Spain, and he says, this is how it works. Look at poor old Cain. Cain has an idea. He's going to bring his idea to bring a korban. So he brings from. He was a farmer, so he brought flax and he brought vegetables. And then Hevel, who's like looking on, says, oh, "Okay, I'll do that too." And he brings an animal, and then God turns to Hevel and not to Cain. That seems very unfair. And then God says to Cain, "If you really want to, you can overcome your Yetzer Hara." I mean, what Yetzer Hara? I mean, all he did, he brought a vegetable offering. It was his idea. He seems to get a raw deal. Says the Sefer Ikrim, this is what's happening. When originally mankind was created, I'm just checking this is still recording. Yeah. When mankind was created, there was not a noticeable enough difference between man and animals. We saw that they're all eating vegetarian food, and the differences are subtle. Okay, mankind can eat fruit. But like I suggested, maybe after they left Gan Eden, maybe there ain't no fruit to eat. So from Cain looking on, growing up outside Gan Eden, people and animals look very similar to everybody. So Cain has a moral perspective, which is people and animals are basically the same. And just like I wouldn't kill a person to bring it as a korban, I'm not going to kill an animal because we're all together. We're all Ba'alei Chaim, like we saw those themes, the Sifsei, Chachamim said, etc. So I'm not going to kill an animal. He was frumkeit that led him to that, but a misguided one because he didn't see a difference between people and animals. Then comes along Hevel, says the Sefer Ikrim, who basically agrees with Cain. There is no difference, but he says, I would never eat an animal, obviously, but to bring to God, I think we can use it to connect with God. Cain looks at this and says, okay, I didn't think you'd be allowed to do that, but then God turns to that korban. And Cain's very upset with this. And God says to him, this is all the Sefer Ikrim, you've got a fundamental misunderstanding about people and animals, and so is your brother Hevel, but at least he gets it a bit better than you. You think there's mamash no difference between people and animals. And he realizes there's some difference, but not a total difference. And you've got to break out of that. Says the Sefer Ikrim, Cain's sin was not that he brought a substandard korban, is that he didn't feel there was any difference between people and animals. And now after he sees Hevel kill an animal, you know what Cain says? You know something? I still don't think there's any difference between people and animals. And now you can kill animals, you can't kill people. Because there's no difference. So he fails to get it, and therefore he kills his brother. And he gets even more annoyed. Meaning he's very indignant when he kills Cain, because God then says to him, like, why did you do that? He says, well, what do you mean? You just approved Hevel's korban. You obviously think it's okay to kill animals and people because it's all the same. And why are you annoyed with me again for killing people? That was his problem. And God says, okay, yeah, I can't do anything with you. You're just not getting it. And therefore, says the Sefer Ikrim, the whole family of Cain was susceptible to this fundamental misunderstanding, which is that there is no difference between people and animals. Think about it, a lot of the Sheva Mitzvot deal with this issue of not killing people and not harming animals inappropriately. They're not listening. They don't want to know. Because it's a complete life of hefkerut, and they can do whatever they like. And then, says the Sefer Ikrim, and this is the most interesting part, when Noach manages to reset the clock, God says to him, you know something? I'm very nervous that this is going to go wrong again. So do me a favor. Instead of killing the people and sleeping with the animals, do me a favor. Sleep with the people and kill the animals. Because at least you'll move in the right direction. And so, you know something? If it walks, eat it. Kill it. You can kill anything. You can eat anything, because that's the only way you're really going to understand the massive difference between people and animals. He builds an enormous thesis on this. And of course, once we get to Har Sinai, what happens to us? We put that back on a vegetarian diet. The man. What is the man compared to? He's compared to seeds. Zerah. Yeah? Yes.
Yeah, but I was under the impression that Hevel only brought things that grew in his carbon. He did not bring an animal.
No, Hevel brought an animal.
Hevel?
Yes, Cain brought plants. Hevel brought an animal.
You said one other brought.
Okay, so Hevel also didn't think that they were completely different, but he at least got it a little bit. But you can't paint Cain and Hevel as good guy, bad guy. Yeah, Cain is clearly a bad guy, and anyone with a name in the Chumash called Hevel is never going to be a good guy. Okay, because Hevel is not a positive name. Yes, sir.
Why gave Noah the right to eat fish?
That's a good question. That's a good question. He doesn't talk about fish. I have to think about that. The fish seems to have managed to kind of go along in that you could argue that fish and animals are completely different. They were made on different days, but then again, so were birds. So were birds. And there's no even minachai with fish, and there's no issue of dam with fish, etc. Maybe fish are somewhere on the pecking order in between. They're not really animals.
Someone says there's no ayin hara with fish.
That's right, because they were under the surface, they get on with their life, and they weren't destroyed. Anyway, I need to go on, because even without a source sheet, we still got a lot of sources to get through. Okay, fine. Okay, so then we get to Har Sinai. What happens to us? We put back on a vegetarian diet, which is this man, and it says again, the Haman kezere gad, ve'eino ka'ain habedolach. It's this beautiful vegetarian, very, very back to the good vegetables. Man is like the avocado of the time. Wow, this is incredible. And what do the people say? We want to eat meat. We miss our meats. Va'asafsuf asher bekirbo hitavu taiva ve'yashuv ve'yivku, and they start crying. Gam b'nei Yisrael, and also the Jews join in. Vayamru mi yachilenu basar. It's not good. They need the basar, and of course they ate the basar, and they died from the plague. And what did they call the place? Vayikra et shem hamakom hahu kivrot hataiva, the graves of lust. Meat is not being given a very good press. The Jews were not meant to eat it. Now they can shecht animals, but it seems very clear from Vayikra they can shecht them only for the purpose of bringing a korban. They can't eat them. They're not allowed to eat them. Just listen for 1 second. Ish mi beit Yisrael asher yishchat shor o kesef. Anyone who wants to shecht a shor, an ox, or a lamb, or eiz, or a goat, b'machne, or asher yishchat michutz l'machne, or if they want to shecht something outside. I'm not getting into all the shchitat chutz and all the details that go there. Ve'el petach ha'oil moed lo heviu lahakriv korban Hashem. And you choose not to bring that animal to the Beis HaMikdash, lifnei mishkan Hashem, dam yechashem. You have shed blood. You have spilt blood. Le'ishahu dam shafach. V'nikrata ha'ishahu mikerev amo. And they get karetz. Now again, on a halachic level, this is talking about shchitat chutz. You shech the korban in the wrong place. But it sounds, and Chazal say, and the Meforshim bring down, that it sounds very like they weren't allowed to eat meat. Only in Dvarim were they allowed to eat meat which was not a korban. And I'll read you the psukim from Dvarim in number 16. Ki yarchiv Hashem elokecha et gvucha. When Hashem broadens your boundaries, He's promised to do that. V'amarta ochla bas, and you say, I want to eat meat. Ki tave nafshecha. You have this taiva lechol basar b'chol avash nafshecha tochel basar, and you really have a taiva. What do? You have to shecht it the way I've told you. You have to kasher it. You have to put them. There's a whole system. There's a whole rigmarole. It's not easy. Because it's called basar ta'ava. It's ideally not what you were meant to do. And the Rashi says there very clearly, Limdat Torah derech eretz. The Torah is teaching in derech eretz. Shelo yitaveh adam lechol basar. A person's not meant to want to eat meat. Elamitoich rachvad yadayim v'oisher. Only if they're very wealthy. It's a luxury item. And meat for most of our history was a luxury item. Yeah. Today it's not a luxury item. People consume thousands of animals over a lifetime. Chickens and fish and cows and in the non-Jewish world pigs and who knows what. Yes, sir.
I just want to know where the idea came from the beginning that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants these korbanot of meat. If meat is so bad.
Oh, good. Rav Kook, coming up in 3 minutes. Okay, you just have to wait a little bit. Chazal even say an amazing thing. And the Meforshim give it one meaning, but it sounds very much like something else as well. Let me read for you from Chulin. Tan Rabban, ki yarchiv Hashem elokecha et gvulecha. When God expands your boundaries and you can shecht meat for eating, not for korbanos. Limda Torah derech eretz, shelo yochal adam basar ele leteavon. You should only eat meat if you really have a te'avon. If you really feel that you really need it. Yochel yikach adam min hashuk. Maybe you could go to a shop, to a store, and buy meat. Okay, vayochel, and buy it from the store. Talmud Loma, the Torah says no. V'zavachta mi bikarcha u'mitzonecha. You better shecht it. You got to shecht it. So, which is interesting. Rashi says it's that you shouldn't be spending excess money on meat because it's a luxury item. You should have better things to spend your money on. And if you happen to have a sheep in the backyard, then okay, you could use that. It's not like going to a store. But it actually also sounds, I'm not telling you this is the only reason, or even this is a legitimate interpretation. I didn't look at all the Meforshim. But it sounds to me that the Gemara is here saying, you want to eat meat? You kill it. If you can kill it, and go through all that, okay, then you can eat it. But you want to pretend that it just fell from the sky? You want to go to a store and pick it up and stick it in the oven? That's not how it works. If you're not prepared to see it die, then don't eat it. Now again, it's not what the Meforshim necessarily is saying, but it sounds very much like that. The Kli Yakar emphasizes that meat is difficult. And hunting, you can hunt, but it's very hard. That's why Esav, he says, sent out by Yitzchak to hunt the meat, because didn't he have any meat anywhere closer to home? He has to go and hunt because he wants him to give up. He wants him to hunt. Look, it's a tircha. I'm not going to do it. I'm going to give up. I'll eat vegetables. It's fine. And I have to shecht it, and I have to do this, and I have to do that. He just wants to make it the Torah, and even before the Torah, wants to make it very difficult to eat meat. And actually, the Rambam paskins in number 20, Tzivu Chachamim, but Derech Eretz, the Chachamim said it's not like an issa. When it says Tzivu Chachamim, it's more like this is strong advice rather than this is prohibited. But derech eretz shelo yachal adam basa el te'avon. You shouldn't be eating too much meat. Dayo lebari le'echel basa me'erev Shabbos le'erev Shabbos. And what do I recommend, says the Rambam, and don't forget he was a doctor as well, he was a physician. Eat meat on Shabbos. Don't eat meat, he says, the rest of the week. Ve'im haya asher, and if you're a very wealthy person, and you have a whole different lifestyle, then and you can afford to eat meat every day. Mutar, you can eat it. It's not like it's treif. It's not like it's prohibited. But really, most normal people should be eating meat on Shabbos. They don't need to eat meat all through the week. And actually, the Berehetiv on Shulchan Aruch says there were minhagim, the people would not eat meat on Mondays and Thursdays. We're not talking Catholics here, we're talking Jews, okay? Catholics had a problem on a Friday. But Jews, he said, had a problem. Many people didn't eat meat on Monday and Thursday. Why? Why on Monday and Thursday? Because Monday and Thursday are days of din. That's why we have a long tachanun. They're scarier days. And the last thing I want to do on a day which has a din is go out there and eat basar taiva. Who needs that? Who needs that against me? I can eat on a Tuesday. It's fine when there's less din coming from Shamayim, but meat, I'm going to be holier on a Monday and a Thursday and not eat meat. And he says maybe that applies on Sunday night and on Wednesday night, and maybe that applies on Monday night and on Thursday night. He doesn't want you to eat meat. And the truth is, how often did they eat meat? They made cholents because that's the only way they could get a little scrap of meat to look halfway decent. Now we eat cholent and chicken and brisket and. Rabbi Wein, I remember him telling me that his father was a shoichet. His father was a rav, of the town. And he used to sit with the shoichet in Eastern Europe on Thursday night. This was his job on Thursday night, that the rav, Rabbi Wein's father, and the shoichet would sit looking at this cow, which was quite honestly almost dead on its feet anyway. This mangy old, half-dead cow. And find some way that they could not make it treif, because the cow was as sick as a cow, and somehow they would have some meat for the whole village from one cow to eat for Shabbos. That was meat for them. And so you stick it in the cholents and you won't look so terrible. So we've really kind of lost a little bit on that. Now, your question, someone's question about the Rav Kook, about why would you bring a secure person about a korban? Let me read you a very famous piece from Rav Kook, and you've heard this before. So Rav Kook comes along, and this is brought down in his Perush on the Siddur. It was organized, his ideas were organized on the Siddur, and it says as follows. Ba'alei Chaim, and this is on the last line of the Shemona Esrei. When you walk 3 steps back and you say, Sheibane Beis HaMikdash, B'mheir v'yameinu v'sein chalkeinu b'sorasecha, you say, V'arva laHashem minchat Yehuda v'Yerushalayim, and then the mincha that we'll be bringing of Yehuda and Yerushalayim in the third Beis HaMikdash will be as pleasing to God, ki yemei olam, like the days of old, ukeshanim katmaniyot, What we're going to bring in the third temple will be as pleasing and acceptable to God as what we used to bring back in the second temple. So he says as follows: Baalei Chaim, Hekredim lemizbech. Baalei Chaim are brought as korbanos. Okay, which are brought, as korbanos. Chal behem atzmam hatikun al yidei hitalotam liyot zevach Lashem. You are matakin them. What every cow, if it could, would really want is, I want to be a korban. I mean, think about it. For a cow, what's the other option? You get turned into whatever, cholents. If you could be a korban, every cow wants to be a korban. Shekevan she'ein behem dat. They can't do it on their own. They need your helping hand. They can't connect with God. They don't have a mind. Eina magiyim lehit alutza. They can't reach this elevation. Ki im b'maseh hanaseh behem. You have to do something with them, to them. B'halot lashem damam b'chelbam. And second, we bring their life force. All the stuff we're not allowed to eat for ourselves, the chaylev, the suet, and the dam, because that's the life of the animal. And therefore, why are you eating the life of the animal? That's dafka the thing you bring on the korbanos. You bring the blood, and you're bringing the life of the animal to God. And the reason we can't eat it outside the mikdash is because it's special. It's one of those things. Do we not eat blood and chaylev because they're bad or because they're too good? Like, do we not wear shatnez because there's something wrong with shatnez? Or because there's something really kaddish about shatnez? And who are you to pretend that you're the Kohen Gadol or the Kohanim wearing shatnez? The Kohanim wore Baalei Chaim. Even the animals will become sentient Baalei Chaim. Once they can think for themselves, then you can't bring them as a korban. You need to do kiruv with the animals. You need to bring them closer to God. Okay? And then he brings the lo yiru v'lo yashchitu b'chol har kodeshi ki mal haaretz da'etz Hashem. Then he says, so what korbanos can we bring? The hakrava shetzia az, and therefore the korbanos we bring then shel mincha. That's why he says v'arva Hashem mincha tiyuda. Now obviously pshat mincha means a gift, but here he says mincha means the mincha mehatzomeach, and that will be acceptable to God. The vegetarian offerings, just like the meat offerings used to be, because there's no hope for grass and flour. That's not going to be able to get close to God, but animals will. Now, of course, Rav Kook still davened the same musaf you daven, and he davened for the korbanos with all the meat to be put back. And therefore, people understand that Rav Kook sees that there are layers to, the future Mashiach. At the beginning, it'll be korbanos as it used to be, but gradually, as things rise and elevate through the process of Mashiach, we'll get to a place where we realize the psukim in Yeshayahu, the wolf won't lie down, won't eat the lamb, and that's how it was in Gan Eden. That's what we said. That's what the Malbim said. They didn't eat each other, and that's where we're going to get to. Rav Kook himself was a vegetarian other than on Shabbos. He ate meat on Shabbos. He did not eat meat during the week. Why didn't he become a full-on vegetarian? Which, by the way, many of his Talmidim did. The Nazir, the David HaNazir, was obviously a vegetarian. Rav Shai Yeshuv Cohen, who some of you may have known him personally, was a very strict vegetarian, maybe even a vegan. I think he was a vegetarian. I'm not sure if he was a vegan. I can't remember. Rav Aaron Lichtenstein. Rav Goren, excuse me. Rav Goren was a vegetarian, but he was a pescatarian. That makes a lot of sense as well.
Rav Sachs as well.
Who?
Rav Sachs.
Rav Sachs was a vegetarian? I did not know that. See, they're all coming out now. They're all coming clean that who was a vegetarian. Rav Kook was worried about a few things, about being a full-on vegetarian. He was worried that we have to prioritize human suffering first. And there's an awful lot of human suffering in the world, and we can't allow our treatment of animals to blind us from the importance of human suffering. And we see this with twisted, mindsets and worldviews where they're more concerned about shchita than they are about the mistreatment of people. And he says there's a danger. There's a danger right now that rather than raising animals like we're meant to see at the end of days to the level of humans, we'll simply bring humans down to the level of animals. And that's because we're not yet ready. And you see this, and there have been a number of really offensive moves on this. Many years ago, there was a terrible exhibition called Holocaust on Your Plate, where they showed pictures of cows being killed in abattoirs next to people, lahavdil elef havdalas being killed, by the Nazis. And they said, there's no difference between them. And you see, this is a danger. Back to Cain. Not everything's changed. In fact, a lot of things have not changed. The veneer of civilization is quite thin. You scratch a little bit below the surface, and people haven't got that much further in the last 4,000 years. And you have, people like Peter Singer, who was a very important animal activist in the 70s, a bioethicist in Princeton. And 99% of what he says, I'm sure everybody in this room would hold by, and you can go on his website and look at his views. But he comes out with very strange ideas, like it's better to experiment on drugs with people who are comatose than with animals who are not, even though they may cause them death or whatever. Because he said, look, at the end of the day, a sentient animal is on a higher level ethically than a comatose person. Even a baby after birth, he said, is not really sentient until a month, and therefore could be aborted after birth, post-birth abortion. And to us, we see, I don't know how anyone could think this. He also, l'shitato, he's consistent, sees no reason why a person could not have a fulfilling sexual relationship with an animal as long as he knew that they consented.
Who is this?
Peter Singer. And this guy is not some nut. He's Jewish, of course. He's not just a nudnik. He's a very, very intelligent person. He was a professor of bioethics at Princeton. Okay, so the Ivies have lost their sheen a little bit. Okay, but I'm just saying, again, I don't want you to be just down on Peter Singer entirely. He did good things as well. But this attitude is, Rav Kook was worried about this, and therefore he said not so quick to be vegetarian. So let's end with a few halachic issues, and they're very easy to deal with. What about Shabbos? Don't I have to eat meat on Shabbos? And the answer is no, actually you don't. The Rambam brings down achilat basa v'shtiyat yain b'Shabbos oneg hula. He sounds like there's an objective oneg Shabbos of eating meat and drinking wine. The Shulchan Aruch doesn't bring it like that. Shulchan Aruch says oneg means oneg. Oneg means eat what you like, not what you don't like. And if you'd rather not eat anything because you really feel a bit greta oneg from fasting, then in principle you can fast as well. Meaning, do whatever it is that gives you the oneg. That's the whole point of oneg Shabbat, and therefore there's no pressure at all on anyone halachically to eat meat on Shabbat, none whatsoever. Whoa, what about Yom Tov? Ein simcha ela b'basar v'yayin. Simchas Yom Tov is a mitzvah d'oraita. It's not oneg Shabbos, which is a d'rabbanon and is broader. So the Gemara brings down pretty clearly that basar was a simchas Yom Tov when we had korbanot. And now we don't have korbanot, then we have wine in place of it. The Rambam, for some reason, brings down both basar and yain, even today. And the Shulchan Aruch, Bet Yosef, throws up his arms and says, I don't understand, like why? Why would you bring down basar? Basar is for the korbanot. And in fact, when the Shulchan Aruch paskins the din of Simchas Yom Tov, he does not, unlike the Rambam, he does not say that you have to eat meat. He does not say that. And the Mishnah Berurah actually brings down in the Bir Halacha that it is a mitzvah to eat meat on Yom Tov, yes. You have fulfilled a mitzvah more objectively different to Shabbos, but it's not a chiyuv. You didn't break anything, you didn't do anything wrong if you want to go milchiks on Yom Tov. Don't tell my wife this, we'll never have another fleshik meal. But you didn't do anything wrong. It's permitted, you're just missing out on that mitzvah. And we see that meat is associated with simcha to some degree because we don't eat it before Tisha B'Av, etc., etc. What about korbanot? It's a little bit of a fake news, actually, because most people did not have to eat korbanot. The one exception to that was the Korban Pesach. You have to eat a kazayas, but only if you're in Yerushalayim. If you live in Ashdod, if you live in Tveria, if you live in Greece or wherever, so you don't have to eat, obviously, any Korban Pesach. So Korban Pesach was only for the people who are in Yerushalayim. You have to be in Yerushalayim? Okay, so then you have to learn the mitzvah of Aliyah L'Regel. Does everybody have to be there? What if you live in Brooklyn? Believe me, when Mashiach comes and we build the Beis HaMikdash, there'll still be Jews in Brooklyn. Did they have to come? No, they don't all have to come. If it's a crazy journey, you don't have to come. Maybe today with a flight. I'm just saying, we're not going to be force-feeding people korbanos. Yes?
Did we have to eat shlamim?
You don't have to. If the family brings a shlamim, someone has to eat it. But you don't have. If you say, I'll pass on the shlamim, thanks. That's not a problem. And the last thing really is health issues. And this really, I leave it to you in the last minute of the share to think about this. You have to speak to the doctors around. I see some of them already. Is it healthy to eat meat or is it not healthy to eat meat? So I don't know many doctors that say it's actually a good thing, it's a healthy thing to eat more meat. I actually heard a cardiologist say quite recently that when you eat sausages, you'd be amazed at how much actual chemical glue there is in the sausage. And even more importantly, the glue is less bad for your health than the sausage meat. Yeah? So it is important to think about that, and the data does change. La halacha, you're not allowed to do anything that's dangerous, but if it's something that people do in normal society, they're not kind of crazy risk takers. Shomer Pasayim Hashem. God protects the simple, okay, the foolish. So it's not prohibited to eat meat, but you have to keep your kind of finger on the pulse. No pun intended with pulses, actually. Sorry, I'm English. Sorry, I couldn't resist that, even though I didn't intend it. But you need to think. And I actually think I've gone on a bit of a diet over the last few months, and I've not become a vegetarian. But I'm taking it a lot more seriously, I suppose, because you get a little bit older. You don't have the same taiva, hopefully, for meat, and the health issues become more important. And therefore, I think we should all at least sit down and consider whether a vegetarian lifestyle, at least during the week, at least on Mondays and Thursdays, is a good thing for us or not. I'm not going to pressure you in any direction.